Welcome everyone to this webinar in the road leading up to NLSAT 2026. The aim of this webinar, as all of you who have joined in would be well aware of, is to help you understand some insider perspectives into the experience at NLS. And when I say experience, I mean both the experience in the classroom as well as the experience outside of it, so that you can have some basis to form your expectations of what life at NLS would look like, and what you are aspiring for. So without taking up any more time, I'll just welcome three of our alumni. There is Nishtha with us, there is Ayushi and Harshal. I'm going to request them to give you a brief introduction of themselves, when they graduated and where they are right now, so that all of you have some sense of their background and what sort of career paths they are pursuing. And then we'll transition into a short discussion around some of the themes that I've already mentioned, which will help you understand the NLS experience. As soon as that discussion is winding down, we'll take some questions that may be raised by any of you in the duration. So, okay, let's start. Who would like to go first? Any of you, Nishtha, Ayushi, Harshal?
I'll go. Hi everyone. I'm Nishtha Jindal, and I did my undergrad from the Narsi Munji Institute of Management Studies in Finance. I graduated from there in the year 2022, and immediately after I joined NLS in the 3-year program, from which I graduated last year. Of course, I mean, we are right now the only graduated batch of the program. We were the inaugural batch as well. And now I'm currently working at the chambers or law offices of Aakashi, Lodha, and Ravi, Raghunath, who are what we call advocates on record at the Supreme Court, which is a special category of lawyers who are allowed to file documents with the Supreme Court. Most other lawyers are not allowed to do that. And for that, we have offices in Delhi. And we mostly work in the areas of commercial law and company law, civil law generally, across a wide range of forums, not just the Supreme Court, but also various other appellate tribunals that are there in Delhi.
Okay, thank you, Nishtha.
Hi everyone, I'm Ayushi. I completed my undergraduate in political science from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, and immediately thereafter I joined NLS in the 3-year program. We graduated in 2025, like Nishtha said, and I joined Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas in their dispute resolution and arbitration practice in Delhi. So, as the name suggests, our practice focuses a lot on arbitration, and we also have quite a few commercial civil suits up our alley, and that's where I'm right now.
Thank you, Ayushi. Harshal?
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harshal. I did my undergraduate degree in economics from Ferguson College in Pune. I graduated there from. I graduated in 2021 and joined NLS in 2022. Currently, I'm working at Anagram Partners as an associate. I primarily work in their general corporate advisory, mergers and acquisitions, and private equity team.
Okay, thank you, Harshal. Let's. What I'm going to do is that I'm just going to ask a few open-ended questions, and please feel free to share your actual experiences in NLS around in response to those questions, so that those aspirants who have joined today get an insider's view on how things are. So first up, how was your classroom experience at NLS? And since all of you were kind enough to mention your undergraduate experience as well, when you were here at NLS, did you draw comparisons with what your undergraduate experience was like? And if you had to share with the aspirants who have joined today as to what was different about the NLS classroom experience? What would you say?
I'll begin, and then, of course, Nishtha and Harshal can join in. I believe one of the biggest shifts from my undergraduate to the endless classroom experience, number one, was just the wide range of people we had from the different educational backgrounds when it comes to the class. So, especially in the 3 year background, we had people who had done engineering, people who had worked as tax officers, people who had done history, English, political science, multiple other subjects. So that means that every other topic that we approached, we had insights from multiple points of view. I remember specifically when it comes to, let's say, a jurisprudence class where we discussed the theory of law. We had a lot of people from history and political science pitching in. And then in a tax classes specifically, people who had worked in those departments had interesting insights to bring from there. So the number one point that I can think of is just the wide variety of the interdisciplinary aspect that we got in the 3 year program. And I think that is something that becomes very valuable because as all of us can attest, when you move into practice and when you start actually functioning and have cases in front of you, you realize that it is all of these practical insights that help you a lot. So something that must have been discussed offhand in class would come to you during these classes, and you also know immediately who to call up or text ki, hey, I am dealing with this issue right now, would you have an interesting aspect, because that person has not just dealt with that in NLS but also before that in their life. So that was one of the very interesting things about my NLS classroom experiences.
Okay, sounds good.
So
Nishtha,
I
Harshal.
definitely, yeah, so I definitely resonate very deeply with what Ayushi said. And I think that's true for all of us that the just the diversity of the people that we interacted with in an NLS classroom, as opposed to a classroom that you come to directly out of high school, is very different. And that breadth and depth of experience added a lot to the classroom. Aside from that, because I am from a commerce background, at least in terms of undergrad, in high school, I did science. So throughout all these 5 6 years of my education before NLS, I was trained in a very different way. I was not trained to think critically. I was trained to look at formulas, to do the math, to accept the theorems and all those things as they are and apply them simpliciter to whatever question is before me and solve an equation or craft, I don't know, financial wealth management plans for people and whatnot. On the other hand, when I came to NLS, it was not just a law degree for me. It was way beyond. It was my first introduction to the social sciences as a whole. And I know that a lot of my classmates who are from the social science background will laugh at it and might even say that it was, not exactly a very deep primer on social sciences. But for me, it was the first introduction and it ended up really changing my worldview on a lot of things. For instance, in not only did we have dedicated courses to social sciences such as political science, history, and everything, even our core law courses such as family law, criminal law, things like that, had distinct elements of social sciences and theory that is a necessary element of placing the law within the larger society that we live in, which is very important for being any sort of a lawyer in any field. And that's why I think the pedagogy at NLS and just the entire approach at NLS of teaching, of learning, of interacting was very refreshing for me, and it's given me a lot to think about critically as well as spatially about the things that happen around us as well as the issues that I interact with. So I think that was one of the biggest things for me about the NLS classroom.
Thank you. Harshal?
At least for me, in terms of how classroom experiences are shaped and how one is taught, was substantially different in NLS than what I had been exposed to in my previous university. The biggest change, of course, was the fact that at least our batch was much more smaller than what I previously had been in, which was, I think the batch sizes, of course, increased now, but at least our batch had hardly, I think, 50, 55 students in the first year. So that was a very different classroom environment for me to begin with. And secondly, I think the way in which classroom discussions eventually happened, where I had never been used to a professor going around and speaking to an individual student, asking questions, asking them any particular line which a reading was assigned to them about, and randomly they would ask, what are your critical thoughts on this? This was something which had never happened, at least with me in my university previously. So that was a very big change. I very vividly remember when Professor Nigam used to take our tax classes. There was not a moment when uh, we were basically thinking about something else, because the way in which he used to grasp attention and the way he used to teach, everyone would be on their toes and everyone would be hooked to what he was saying. And Ayushi can very well attest, and Nishtha also, about how our evidence law classes were conducted by Professor Kunal Ambasta. I think a huge amount of difference in how professors taught here versus how I was taught previously. So I think those classroom experiences really shaped how I actually view studying law as a whole, because I understood for a fact that it was just not like an economics subject which I used to study before, which I could manage on my own. This was something which, of course, needed a lot of reflection from other people. How so economics is generally objective, right? But here there's nothing objective about law. It is always, if not at all times, but 70-80% of the time subjective. And just to get an understanding of the fact that your opinion can in fact be wrong and there can be alternate opinions to a particular thing, was something which I took away from all the classroom discussions we had. So that, I think, were some key takeaways for me, at least in my experiences at NLS.
Yes, and I hear and what the common thread that I heard in your responses was about the diversity in the classroom, and I've heard this from several others as well. So I think that that certainly stands out as a unique feature for many students, that they get to engage with such a wide variety of people. And it was good to hear from Ayushi that it seems that even after graduation, all of you have kept in touch, and you have a network of sorts among yourselves at least. I think that for me was very refreshing to hear, that those connections that you made in the classroom have stayed on, at least so far. Only time will tell how strong the network remains. But that was a refreshing thought for me to hear from at this point. Okay, I'll ask another question, this time maybe not so much about the classroom, but outside of the classroom. And I know that at NLS, the academic calendar is very hectic. Of course, all the aspirants who have joined us will only get introduced to that should they should they become part of the NLS life. But it is a reality, and academic rigor is something that we obviously emphasize. But how would you would you like to share how you managed your time? How did you balance your studies with extracurricular activities outside of the classroom, or any of the many events which are always going on in NLS, music or dance or debating, or any of the festivals? How was your experience outside of the classroom? Did you get time for it, for one? How did you make time for it? And was it overall a well-rounded experience or not?
So for me, personally, I would first give this very big caveat that what your experience is with the academic rigor at NLS or any such institution is an extremely individual experience. So is any sort of coping mechanism you come up with to deal with that. Because all of us are coming from very different places in terms of how we consume knowledge, how well we receive knowledge, say audio visually. Are we, we're very receptive when we're listening to a lecture? Are we more receptive when we're reading a book? Or, are we just are we just a person who likes to read read things in their own time and are not exactly the best benefactors of a classroom setting? For me personally, the classroom setting was the best learning environment and the best learning opportunity at NLS. And that's been something that's been true for me since the beginning. And that trend sort of held on in law school as well. So, like Harshal mentioned, for instance, we had some really, really great engaging professors, and every professor had a very unique pedagogy in themselves. For instance, I remember I was teaching assistant to Professor Sahana Ramesh in her tort law course for the first year BLLB program. Now, Professor Sahana also happens to have taught us tort law in our very first year. So I remember when when I was taking this teaching assistance course, I was supposed to teach a few hours and teach a particular topic within that course. But before that, I also had to sit in on a few classes of hers. And I remember just sitting there and being transported back to first year in how mesmerized you get by the kind of thought experiments that she plays. Because tort law is very like, oh, like what if a car fell on you or some, really insane situation like that you wouldn't even think of. And Professor Sahana really capitalizes on that. She will not use slides. She will not use anything on the projector or anything of that sort. It will just be her and her thought experiments. And she will wrap you up in that so much that you won't even realize when you have arrived at the actual doctrine and understood it. So I think that way the classroom itself was the biggest way for me to learn and be on top of things and actually understand as much as I could. So I tried to do 80% of my studying work in the classroom itself, whether that meant taking notes to keep myself attentive, or like staying back 5 minutes extra later on to complete my notes and things like that. And by getting that 80% done in the classroom left me with almost all of the time with enough time to do other things. Obviously, there are times when you're just not able to do that because of XYZ reason, and you do have, to catch up on a lot of things later, and your sleep might suffer, extracurriculars might suffer. But I think this was the biggest technique for me to get through all this.
Okay.
Yeah. I think just to take off from where Nishtha said, I think I agree fully in terms of how, personally for me, also the classroom was the biggest place where I did most of my learning, which meant that the time other than the classroom is something that I had a lot to for myself and for the extracurriculars. Personally, Unit Week, which is something we have annually in the last trimester, is something that I enjoyed a lot. So if there were 5 competitions every day, I would at least be a part of try to be a part of 70% of them. And the purpose is not to do them well, particularly. The purpose is to just enjoy your fullest. Be that from coordinating dances, just singing, whether you know how to or not, or just being in the background while you push the good singers to the front and all of that. Other than that, I think NLS provides opportunities to participate in a lot of committees, a lot of cultural things, a lot of academic, co-academic sort of committees, be that mooting, debating, and number of things, right? Policy. So for me, I think the choice of what I want to do in terms of those committees was also something that required some thought, in the sense that I took the decision that since debating is something that I had explored in my undergrad, I would keep that aside so that I have time for other things that I can do in law school. Because I know people sometimes approach these co-curricular things from the perspective of what will look best to a potential recruiter 3 years down the line. But sometimes these co-curriculars are all that are also keeping you, grounded in the law school experience as a whole. You don't want everything there to be about just academics, unless of course you enjoy it. So in that sense, not necessarily falling into the trap of doing the most in terms of those co-curriculars is also important, so that you give yourself time and space to think of the things that you actually would enjoy doing, the community that you would enjoy participating in. I think that became a big thing for me, and I realized after my first year, where I applied for everything and I realized I can't sustain that as a person, I held back in my second year, and then I started doing things. It also, with time, you realize in your first trimester, you realize that you don't have to read every reading from every letter of it. You understand the technique of how to read something valuably in less time, how to make notes in less time. So with time, the amount of time and space that academics takes for you also reduces. You learn that through co-learning. You realize how you can distribute, notes, not just note making, but in the sense that co-learning. You will have some people take up some things and then they'll teach it to you. So all of in those ways, the kind of culture you build within your class, within your batch, also helps you take out time for these other things then. And I think that was a big part for our batch as a whole.
I think I totally resonate with what Nishtha and Ayushi have said. I would just like to, at least for me personally, the uh, aside from what Ayushi and Nishtha have both said, the most important thing which I would rather I'd say two most important things which made my life at NLS bearable because of how much stress can academics give one. I think participating in sports regularly. We have your annual or semi-annual, whatever you would like to call it, sports events. You would have cricket, you would have football, you would have people playing basketball, so on and so forth. Then I used to make sure at least I'm going to the gym, keeping myself physically fit for 4 or 5 days at least in a week. Aside from that, I think the most important factor would be my roommates at NLS, whom I had the most amazing time with, and other relationships also, which I formed aside from what I formed in my college as well. I think I deeply value them, and the time I had with them, the time I spent with them, substantially helped me to be in NLS in a state in which I can thrive, and it would not be like it's a thing which I have to now tolerate for 3 years. No, I think all these things together made NLS much more an enjoyable experience for me.
Yeah, I think what I'll just pick up on what Harshal said last, which is the relationships that usually when we think of staying in a hostel, and especially for those, or especially for several people who, like all of you mentioned, have had some work experience before joining this 3-year LLB course at NLS, all of them would have lived independently, and for them the thought that they'll have to live in a hostel, whether inside the campus or outside of it, that usually is quite a daunting thought, because it requires readjustment in a way that many people sort of disconnect with after their undergraduation is complete. So the hostel life aspect is usually something that a lot of people wonder whether they'll be able to adjust to it. Living with multiple people, let's say sharing a room, and therefore living with multiple people in a smaller space than they would ordinarily be used to. So I think how Harshal expressed it is what my experience at NLS was as well. So I completed my 5-year BLLB honors course from NLS many years ago. And for me also, the hostel living experience was something along the lines of what Harshal said, that it's actually not about sharing a smaller space with many people. It's actually forming friends for life, and they are your support structure. So the residential life part of it is actually about that, finding friends for life and actually finding a support structure, because you need that to traverse through that 3-year period. Um, and okay, since I sort of opened it up to what sort of concerns or fears that aspirants may have about joining NLS, I'll ask you one more question, and you can take a couple of minutes, think about it, and answer that. That if there was one thing that you feel in hindsight that you should have known when applying for the 3-year LLB honors program, you should have known before joining the 3-year LLB honors program, what would that be? Um, and as I said, you can take a couple of minutes to just think about it. That if you reflect on it, and if that is some guidance that you can give to the aspirants, that would be, I'm sure, valuable too.
I think personally for me, the biggest problem that I faced was that for as the first batch, we had a lot of unknowns in front of us and a lot of anxiety surrounding that. I think coming from a political science degree where I necessarily wasn't the most educated in the kind of avenues I could explore after that, considering most of my undergrad happened during COVID, I think a very preliminary view that I had was that law would be like a sure shot, one way path to deciding, okay, at least my career is secured. And I think that is something that a lot of people, when they're switching to law, think of. If I'm like very candidly, that's why people may want to switch degrees. Maybe they want to think of it as maybe it's a more employable degree. I think when we entered and we realized that we don't have any placement committee like for our batch in place because we formed one. We had no clarity as to how would law firms or how would any other recruiter see us as a new degree, as something that they haven't like we were unknowns for them as well. I think we as a batch love to call ourselves guinea pigs because we gave in a lot of feedback that had changed the program also. So maybe a little naively, I entered thinking that entering NLS would solve a lot of my problems, but it does not necessarily do so. Um, you still have to put in that work, you still have to put in that initiative, that effort. Luckily, so for the following batches, there are still some structures in place. There is still some clarity. There are, of course, now they have seniors to look forward to, whose help they can take on, guidance in front of them. There is a community within the 3 year batch that has formed, and also with the 5 year programs to some extent. All of that has is now in place. But for us, I think realizing being there that we don't have any of that was a big shock. And had I known it, probably the feelings that I entered endless would have been a little more toned down. How again, even though these structures are now in place, I think everyone who's entering endless needs to at their core know that what they're going in there for is the experience in terms of the kind of knowledge you receive. Of course, the university as a whole is a big thing. Like getting into the best law school in India is by itself a big deal, and it does help you moving on in life as well. But taking that as a sure shot 100% as to say that now that I've gotten in, it means everything is set is not true. Getting in is literally the first step. And all of us having experienced that know that be it 3 years, 5 years, whatever we have done, it's those years that will eventually shape our life. And yeah, I think had I known all of that before, maybe I would have been a little more tempered in my expectations. In my first year there, coming with such big expectations and then realizing that, oh, that's not it, was something that really shook my worldview for a bit.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
I totally agree with what Ayushi has said. Uh, just sharing some other things which I got to understand that was not particularly only true for me, but was also, in fact, something which happened with a lot of my peers and also the batch junior to us. Because since we were the first batch, of course, the junior batch used to come to us and take advice from us, speak to us about our experience, so on and so forth. So, in my first trimester, given that how pedagogy in NLS is organized, how exams are conducted, the number of assignments you have, it is usually not so smooth in the first trimester, or for me at least, it was not so smooth for the first 2 trimesters. And I was not very prepared for the same. Uh, as I said, this will of course differ from person to person. But given that I was coming from an economics background, I was very much trained to answer in numbers and extremely like for example I wouldn't be so descriptive with my answer as someone in NLS would be expected to, because we had a lot of subjects which were in fact descriptive, right? So these things were a little different for me, and it took some time for me in my first uh, couple of trimesters to adjust to that. So this is true for other people as well. When they see their grades are not as good as what their peers are getting, or might be the case that what you were scoring in your previous undergraduate degree, there's a substantial amount of difference in what you are scoring here. But just wanted to share that this is in fact true with everyone, if not each and every person, but almost 90-95% of them would be experiencing the same thing. And it was very much true for me, and I was not prepared for the same. Like, it took at least, it was a very big shocker for me when I used to see my grades fall down so much in the first 2 trimesters. And only when you have that experience as to how you're supposed to complete your assignments, how you're supposed to answer, what your approach to a particular question should be like, this only comes with experience. And I think, even if someone is, say, not scoring very well in the first trimester, just wanted to share that it is just a part of your experience which you will build, and eventually you will get adjusted to it. So even if it comes as a shocker for you, it is a shocker for everyone else as well.
Hmm.
I think Ayushi and Harshal have covered at quite length the kind of feelings that we should have thought of before with respect to the life at law school. But I think I'll use similar words that Ayushi did, that we should temper our expectations. But for me, it was not just about law school. It is actually about being a lawyer. You will get into NLS, you will get through law school, you will get through all the trimesters, and then life will actually hit you. I think becoming a lawyer has truly been the singular most humbling experience of my life. And for me, I mean, obviously, this may not hold true for a lot of my peers and for a lot of people in this meeting, but I always wanted to be a lawyer. Like, if you ask me what my childhood dream was, it is this. I really have no other better, more interesting answer. I'm actually that boring. But because of that, I was, as Professor Nigam likes to describe us in first year, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when I came into law school, just, ready to, I don't know, be the social justice warrior who will get everyone a fair hearing and a right to be heard and everything. And then you actually come into the system. I obviously can't speak for my friends who are in corporate law or in, general counsel practice and other ways of being a lawyer. But at least in litigation, when you actually have to go to court day to day as a woman, as a first generation lawyer, it's it's really something else. And I would personally tell myself, the person who was entering law school, that those 3 years are the easy part, and I should enjoy that a little more. Give myself a little less, headache for every little grade that, falters here and there, and actually try to have as much fun as I can in those 3 years, because I'm not going to get to do that afterwards. I used to hate the 75% attendance requirement that we had in college. But now when I'm working, there are days when I wake up, and though it's the kind of day that I would have taken off within my 25%, but I can't do that because I have to get to court because there is a hearing. That's when I realized that law school has ended. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would tell myself back then.
Nishtha, I
That was
can't
very
agree more.
interesting to hear.
I
That was very interesting to hear.
just one thing to add.
Yeah,
I
I
really
mean,
can't
sorry.
agree
Yeah.
more. This is I feel like now that we look back into NLS, and while being in NLS, all of us have had moments where we're just like, we just want to get out of here for a bit. Now we would do anything to get back to that, because there is no way you can, like you said, waking up one day and wanting to take an off, and that's just not possible because there are so many things that have to be
Yes.
done, and even your days off are not necessarily your days off. So, so that was the easy part, and all of us like should have enjoyed it like a lot more when we had the chance and not stressed about these things as much in hindsight.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end this discussion. I'm glad, Nishtha, that you mentioned what you did. It's absolutely true. When we work outside, then we just think back that, how much fun it is to just show up and sit in the classroom, no matter how many hours you have to sit. You are not responsible for any clients who are very, very demanding of you, and it's just a good life. I think a student life is the good life, and everyone should enjoy that, no matter uh, uh, what your grades are and what specific assignments, etc., that you're required to deliver. So okay, I think that was a very honest set of reflections on your time here. What I'll do now, we are at almost at 4:40, so just to keep on schedule, I'm going to look at the chat box. I think a lot of questions have been posted here. So I'm just going to take a minute, sort of sort them through, and maybe I'll pick up some of the more oft repeated ones so that we can at least answer a few questions of these. Okay, so I'm just going to speak out a few of the questions, and we can possibly answer them as we go along. So there's a question on what are the timings of the college for the 3-year LLB program. Let me answer that, and some of the other questions, Ayushi, Nishtha, and Harshal can jump in. So on the timings issue, it's just it depends upon what your timetable looks like for a term. Classes can start as early as 9 and can be, and your last class can be as late as ending at 7. But it's not that your the day schedule is from 9 to 7 non-stop. There are fixed number of courses every term, which is 4, and the number of hours per course is also fixed. For a core course, it's 6 hours a week. For an elective course, it's 4 hours a week. So depending upon what is the combination of the courses in a term, your timetable can be scheduled sometime from 9 a.m. in the morning till 7 p.m. in the evening, but never a continuous set of classes. Just they will be organized during between those hours every day. Okay, one question that I did spot, which I think the three of you can jump in, which is that a question has been asked. Please shed light on the aspect of getting internships, how easy or difficult it is, especially for people who are first generation lawyers. So I think that is one question, and something related to that, I'm just going to read out so that we can combine it. Okay, I think someone has a specific question for Ayushi as to how she successfully landed up with a corporate job. And the question is, Ayushi ma'am, how did you get Amarchand Mangaldas? Was corporate job what you knew from first trimester, or how did it pan out over the college years? So, okay, so relatively related questions. Question number one, how did you figure out your internships, and a related question, that how did you plan towards your ultimate post outcome after completion of graduation?
Okay, I'll start, and of course, then Harshal and Nishtha can pitch in. I think my experience with internships was that initially, for the first year at least, I wanted to see what all there is to offer and then see what part of law and what part of practicing law would I enjoy more. And I think this is an approach that is also something that was suggested to us by a lot of our professors, that don't just jump in and try to get, fancy looking internships just for your CV. Instead, try different things and then make a choice of what area of law do you want to enter. So at least for the first 2, 3, 4 trimesters, I would say, my internships were looked very different. And you need not intern every trimester break is something that I realized after, let's say, 6 months into law school, and I really needed a break. And I had to actively decide that it might feel like you need to intern because everyone else is interning around you, but you do it at your own pace. I think the first internship I did was at a small boutique firm, and not a very I don't think I contributed to the team at that level because I had just done law for 3 months, and that too mainly theory. And what I did there was basically realize that I do enjoy at least some parts of law. I enjoy being given a proposition, being like explain the facts and then looking for what's relevant, and just see that if I can contribute to a case in any matter whatsoever. I think that was my assurance that I'm landed in the right place in terms of what I want to do. So I think a couple internships is just that. I think my first trial internship, which is also a mandatory internship that we do in our February internship break, that changed the experience for me a lot, because that's where I realized that litigation, going to court, having court facing matters is something that I would enjoy personally. However, since I hadn't done any Gen Corp internship by then, I did not rule it out entirely. I also believe that a lot of the way a lot of these internships might pan out for at least 80 to 90% of the people is that you might want to apply for a corporate internship in your first break, but you will not get it because you would have done no corporate law course by then. So it's only in your second year, by the time you have done something like in law, you know at least basic concepts and principles that you will meaningfully contribute in any internship that you do. So doing anything before that, at least in terms of a big corporate internship, doesn't make a lot of sense. In a trial court internship, you learn how to go to court, how to just, file appearances for your seniors, let's say. Uh, simple things you will realize are a lot that matter in terms of litigation. But in a Gen Corp, if you can't read a contract, you might not be very useful for your team in that sense. So planning your internships around the kind of courses you have done is something that you learn when you're in law school, especially when it's consolidated into a 3-year program and you don't necessarily have a lot of time to show in your CV when you have recruitments after 2 years, let's say. My first Gen Corp internship, I realized that it's not for me. I don't enjoy doing due diligence a lot, and I think that was it for me. From that onwards, I realized that disputes. Even if I want to enter a corporate structure, I would want to do it in a disputes or arbitration team. Thankfully, that's where I landed in. I got Amarchand Mangaldas through our campus placements, and so before that, even through campus internships, like through our RCC only, I got 2 internships with trilegal, and I think that helped a lot when it come to showing dispute corporate experience on my day zero. And I was lucky enough to be offered an offer from Amarchand, and that was my internship experience. I think, again, largely very dependent on the first few trimesters being about what I want to explore, and then being able to narrow it down and not just doing everything, not just going always and landing up with nothing. I think even if I wanted corporate because I wanted that kind of surety, and that's the part that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the kind of structure of work it gave me, the kind of as an act, like it gave me surety to some extent, and I think I needed that to be able to deliver. I think I'm a person who works well when I have set deadlines, when I know what to deliver, how to deliver, and I work well within that chain of command. So it worked for me within that, choosing the practice area you want, streamlining that. That is how I approach my internships personally. I'm sure it's a very different experience for everyone, though, and Nishtha and Harshal can pitch in.
Definitely. So I think my approach and experience with internships in law school was fairly different from what Ayushi said. And that just goes to show how it all is done very individually, because there's so many things that you can do after law school. One thing that, I will say right now is that Ayushi said that in her first internship, it felt like she did not really contribute much to the team. I sometimes feel like that even today, 7, 8 months into the profession, that am I really contributing anything to this chamber, because I really don't know anything. And that sort of thing is what I try to internalize in all my internships, that I sort of accepted the fact that I'm not going to be contributing anything. You as a law student are not, in most situations, are not going to be an asset to wherever you are going. You are there for a month. For the rest of the 12 months, that workplace is operating regardless. So you're clearly not really bringing anything that they can't operate without. So instead, what I tried to focus on in my internships was to learn as much as possible, and more importantly, to build connections. And that's why that's also connected to why I actually did not do any internships that were offered through the college itself, or through what Ayushi described as the RCC, which is the Recruitment Coordination Committee. For a helpful preface, we get 3 internship breaks every academic year. That's in June, February, and October. So I tried to do as many internships in litigation chambers because, like Ayushi said, I played around a little in my first year. I did a bunch of different internships, such as legal research in academia. I did one corp internship as well. before deciding that I really only like the courtroom setting. I do not like a corporate setup. And then I sort of embarked on this entire quest that I'm just going to speak to as many people as possible, mostly our professors. And I ended up getting internships with different alumni from our college in who are practicing in chambers in Delhi. And like I said, I just went in with the idea that I'm here to actually just make friends. So I was just my most sociable, outgoing self in the internships. I was not trying to prove a point. I was not being too harsh on myself. Obviously, I was working hard and trying to, be on time and show some level of discipline and punctuality to leave a good impression. But aside from that, that's the sort of mindset I went in with. And safe to say, I think looking back as well, it's the best thing. And like, it's the best thing I could have done for myself. And now that I am an associate as a chamber and I have dealt with interns, I can attest that what the assumption that I was going in with, that an intern is not usually very useful, was true. I mean, if I give any work to an intern right now, I do not have any intention of relying on it. I know that I'm going to have to do that task entirely by myself because I as a lawyer cannot risk something that an intern might have missed. Intern is not answerable to the client. I am. So I think that's a helpful understanding to go with in your internships.
Okay.
At least for me, I looked at internship as something to just give me an understanding of what I would like to specialize in. I did not have a set path, as Ayushi also said for herself, whether to go in litigation or not, whether to go in uh, corporate advisory or not. But after I actually did my internships, I did my internships with uh, lawyers working in the district court as well. I also did a judicial internship with a judge in the Delhi High Court, and then a couple of other High Court internships as well. But after that, when I actually started doing my internship at Anagram Partners, where I'm currently working as an associate with, I figured out that I was in fact interested to work in mergers, acquisitions, and private equity. So that is something which Ayushi said she hated. I actually ended up liking it. So I think it is a very subjective experience, which uh, is going to differ depending on what area of law you eventually gain an understanding in. Like, for example, I remember for a fact 70 to 80% of the class used to hate our corporate law lectures. They did not like, because given that most of the people who were coming into NLS were eventually people who were interested to go into litigation, and I think that is in fact true today as well. Many more, if I may not say 50%, but at least 70 to 80% of them are in litigation right now, because they were in fact interested in litigation. So people were not very fond of corporate law classes. But I actually was the opposite, and I actually enjoyed a corporate law class a lot. And I in fact ended up taking a teaching assistant seminar on the same as well. So I think internships will be an opportunity for you to eventually figure out what area of law you would be interested in to practice and not just study. But I would never regret my decision.
Okay, thank you for these candid reflections. I think there's a follow-up question specifically for Nishtha, so I'm just going to say it out now. My question is to Nishtha ma'am. As a first generation litigation lawyer, do you feel that being in NLU helps more than other universities?
At the risk of sounding a little cliche, and I know that a lot of people from other universities might not agree with me, but for me personally, it's 100% yes. And I think that the NLS alumni network is singularly the main reason why I'm happy with what I'm doing right now and why I've landed up with an opportunity that I really value. For instance, my boss right now, Miss Aakashi Lodha, my boss and my mentor, she is NLSIU BLLB batch of 2014, whom I got in touch with another lawyer who I interned with, which is Mr. Abhinav Sikri, also batch of 2014 BA LLB NLS. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but like it's been eating away at me. I'm actually so used to taking my boss's name all the time. I actually refer to Ayushi with that, even though Ayushi has been my classmate since the past 3 years. But that's just the kind of bond you end up sharing with some of the people you meet in the NLS alumni network. And I don't think I would have had any of these opportunities or exposure if not for that. Even if you don't consider directly opportunities, but just having that kind of access and being able to connect with those kind of people from the NLS alumni network is a great opportunity, because we have people who are in extremely diverse areas. There are people who are doing management consulting in Seattle, or doing some citizenship work right in like the alleys, in the back alleys of Assam and the Guwahati High Court and whatnot. So regardless of what you're looking for, regardless of the kind of work you want to do, or even if you come across a situation where you need someone's help, you will have someone or the other to turn to within the NLS alumni network. And I think as a first generation lawyer, I could not have asked for anything more, because I can't speak for other bars, but at least in the Delhi bar, it really matters what your surname is. It really matters where you have a chamber, whether it's in the Delhi High Court or the Supreme Court or in Tisazari, whether you have a chamber at all. And without having something to give you a leg up, there is a serious entry barrier to this profession, at least as a litigation lawyer. And being from NLS is a great way to at least scale some of that entry barrier. Again, it's still obviously a challenge, and it will remain so for the rest of my life. I think I've come to terms with that. But still, I think the short answer to your question, 100% yes.
Okay, good. That was a very clear answer, and hopefully everyone who heard you speak got a sneak peek into the realities of life. They're harsh realities, but that is what everyone is bound to face sooner or later. Okay, so last few minutes, I think I'll just jump to some exam prep questions. Um, One question was that since there are only about 2 months left to the entrance exam, could you please give us a few tips on how to go about GK, especially for applying it for Part B essay answers? So I'm just going to read that out again for the benefit of three of you. Since there are only about 2 months left for to the entrance exam, could you please give us a few tips on how to go about GK, especially for applying it for Part B essay answers? And can I combine it with some other preparation question? Okay, I don't see any more preparation questions, but maybe I can combine it with another question about being at NLS. So, what are key cognitive qualities required for LLB pursuing at NLS? How STEM graduate is adjusted with LLB curriculum at NLS, especially engineering graduates. Okay, so first let's quickly attempt the preparation question. Any tips on the essay writing, Part B essay writing? I'm sure it's very far away for all of you, but anything that you can think and recollect about that?
I think 2 months left, just practicing how to write and having someone proofread it for you. Because a lot of the times what we read makes so much sense in our head, but not doesn't necessarily come across as clearly and as crisply to someone reading it. And I think that's a big part. And just to connect it to the second part, also the kind of cognitive abilities, I think the exam is structured in a way that they're looking for people who can reason out. So, of course, law school will teach you the law that they want you to know, right? But what they're looking for is people who can then make logical deductions out of that. And I think that is what the part B of the exam is structured towards. That's the unique part of the exam. They are giving you problems that you might have to face not just as a lawyer, but as a normal person, and then asking you to think through how that can be solved. How would you arrive at a solution or a decision on those? And just to make those logical steps one by one, not to miss out on any assumptions, and to write it crisply, because the exam is also lengthy to an extent, and you need to finish it within a stipulated time. And that can only happen when you put pen to paper. It can't happen just you read a question and think of, okay, ABCD points, I can do this and get through. You will have to, it's only when you sit down to take a mock or sit down to write an answer, do you realize that um, phrasing it in a particular manner is what takes time, and you can only learn that through practice. So I don't think 2 months is less time. It's more than enough time for someone who wants to really try to gain that skill And they can do that through having anyone, any peer, just like read it and then see if it makes sense or not, and then talk it out. And I think once you've got that down, you got part B basically. You've understood what part B is asking of you.
Okay, thank you. That was useful. I'm sure that clarifies the doubt. Uh, uh, Nishtha or Harshal, you want to jump in with either of the two questions?
E- Yeah, if I may just add to what Ayushi said, one very important thing to remember for not just this exam, but I'm speaking from experience from exams in NLS generally, and I think this is true for NLSAT also, is to not overwrite. I've been a lot guilty of the same. I did the same mistakes throughout my law school, at least for the, not throughout my law school, but at least for the first uh, say 4 trimesters. I was doing the same mistake again and again, which is to which is to overwrite your answers. So this is especially true with a competitive exam like and like NLSAT. So it is not about you answering one question extremely well. It is about answering all the questions only decently. That will actually fetch you more marks than what you think your one question answered well might do. So that is one thing I think which aspirants need to keep in mind.
For me, I
Okay,
think, sorry.
no, please go ahead.
So for me, I think it was important to understand the tenor of the question and what is expected of you in the answer. But the question, like Ayushi said, is going to be phrased as a situation that you come across in day-to-day life. It's not necessarily related to the law or has anything to do with the law. It's something that will require reasoning. So number one is for you to take a stand. It will give you a situation which will have two or more sides that you can align with. You're supposed to take one of those sides and then you're supposed to justify your decision as to why you're taking that side. Now, as to the justification, that is the most important part. There is no wrong or right side to take. The only thing that matters is the justification you provide for it and how well reasoned that justification is. Now, for that, I follow this method that I've been following since the exam, and till date, I use it when I draft my pleadings for court. Is IRAC, and I mean, I'm sure that a lot of you might be familiar with this already. Everyone who went to law school has definitely heard of this way too many times. But IRAC is basically an acronym which is IRAC, which is issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. So at the outset, at the very beginning of your answer, you write down what the issue is. What is the main point of contention in the situation that's there before you, in the dispute that's there before you? Number two is the rule. Now, rule does not mean a legal principle, especially in the NLSAT. You are not a law student, you're not a lawyer, and you're not expected to know those kind of things. If you try that, you will likely make a mistake and just sound even worse. So, rule means any sort of principle that you want to apply. That principle could be as simple as equality. All residents in a residential society should have equal access to common spaces, right? That's the principle. That's just a basic normative statement or like a should or ought statement that comprises your rule. Analysis is the part where you apply that rule, you apply that principle to the facts given at hand in a way that resolves the issue. Now, I know this sounds a little abstract, but like Ayushi said, put pen to paper, just try to flesh it out as much as you can, try to look at as many situations as you can, and see how you can apply that rule to the facts, and then finally arrive at a conclusion. This is the part that many people forget and lose marks on. They've written that entire story and essay and whatnot, but they don't write the conclusion. What is your stand? What is your answer? Even if it's a single threadbare sentence, just write a conclusion as to what your final stand is and how your entire reasoning led you to that.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm sure all your responses were very will be very helpful in the days coming for upcoming days for the preparation of the exam. And also a very sincere thank you to the three of you for taking out your valuable time to join this webinar and share your thoughts with everyone. So thank you, Ayushi. Thank you, Nishtha. Thank you, Harshal. And we are 2 minutes ahead more. We have crossed the 2 minute the timeline by 2 minutes, but we'll end the webinar at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Sanyukta.
Thank you, Sanyukta. All the best, everyone.